guys, Jay here. Welcome to Eons of Battle. I have some big projects coming up in 2024. Army projects. Some 40K, some not 40K, and one that I just refer to as the big one. But first, my Death Guard. I have had a Death Guard army for years now, and I like the Death Guard. They're really cool. I really enjoyed the video game Chaos Gate Demon Hunters. And I have some really interesting pieces for this army. I have 2 Blight drones of Nurgle from Forge World, and inside of this box is the now out of production Nurgle Demon Prince, a super gloopy, ugly, awesome miniature that I'm really excited to add to this army that currently doesn't exist. Right now, I have not the right number of Plague Marines and not the right number of Poxwalkers because I've been using them in Kill Team, so I only painted exactly the number that I actually need. And I have this 3/4 completed Blight Hauler. I really like Nurgle, and this army specifically is very interesting and unique to me because I paint my Nurgle with a currently discontinued line, a very small line of paint. And it's kind of a Mr. Megorian's Wonder Emporium situation where when that paint runs out, my army is complete. I'm not gonna add anything else to it. And paint goes a long way, so I do think I'm gonna be able to get everything I want done for this army before that paint runs out. But I gotta paint Morty. I gotta paint more Tarian, and I am very nervous and very excited to paint Morty because he's like this big. He's a massive miniature, and it's gonna take a long time to paint him up to my Death Guard standard, but I am really excited. I am going to play with this army in 2024. I am going to play with Death Guard. Maybe when the Codex comes out, I'll actually have this army completed and ready to go, but I mean, it's here and it's ready to go right now. So I am definitely gonna get a move on with my Death Guard army. Really excited about this. Speaking of things I am really excited for, I am now a bug player. I now have a Tyranid army. I have Leviathan and I have 1 squad of Zoanthropes. Painted, finished, ready to rock and roll, have been played with, still haven't won a game of Warhammer 40K, but that's beside the point. I went on a little bit of a Tyranid shopping spree. After completing Leviathan, I really quickly brought this army up to 2,000 points, probably a little bit more than 2,000 points, probably kind of knocking at the door of 3,000 points, but I'm really excited because in my first few games with this Tyranid army, they feel really different. I've played a lot of Orcs, I've played a lot of Space Marines, and the Tyranid feel really different. And that feeling, I've been chasing that feeling and buying bugs left and right. I've also been buying a lot of secondhand miniatures, partly because of my budget and partly because I'm really interested in doing a little bit of eBay miniature rescuing, if you will, trying to see what I can do with actually finished and painted miniatures and then kind of giving them a new lease on life. I've got my requisite 20 gargoyles, which seems like an auto include in Tyranid lists. And I love these guys because they're huge and horrible and they monkey in a barrel like nobody's business. It is impossible to pick up just one of these guys. And gosh, Games Workshop, make more Tyranids because I want Exocrines so bad. And there are no Exocrines in North America. They are all accounted for. I want like 3. I need 3 of them for my army and I cannot get a single one of those suckers. But my Tyranids, I need my Tyranids to exist. I've made significant progress on this army. I painted Zoanthropes, but I also have base coats on some of these guys. I've got my Tyrant Guard, I've got Warriors, I've got Raveners, I've got this guy, the Moloch. I have everything I need for my Tyranid army. I just need time. I just need time to actually paint it. I painted Leviathan in 1 week, and I feel like I need to give myself another 1-week challenge to get enough of this stuff completely painted up to where it's playable. I've been playing it in Tabletop Simulator, but it's not the same thing. I need to push around my plastic. I want to play with my miniatures. And so I desperately need to get more paint on these guys because the Tyranid are so much fun. And I just need to hunker down, get this project going, and get some paint on these miniatures because they're so cool. They're so different. I've painted hundreds of Space Marines and Tyranid feel so different to Space Marines, and it makes them so interesting and so much fun to paint. My Tyranid army is like top of my list of things I would really like to get done in 2024. This is an army I'm actively playing with, and I really want to get it painted. I have thoroughly been enjoying Warhammer 40,000 10th edition. It has given me a new lease on Warhammer. One of these days, I will actually win a game, hopefully, with this Tyranid army. But there are some games that aren't 40k that I am very excited for. This spread requires a little bit of backstory. We here at Eons of Battle, we play board games every Saturday with our friends for like 14 hours. It's wild. And I'm always trying to push a little bit of wargaming into the mix, and it's just not fair. Like Warhammer 40,000 takes like 4 hours to play. It is obnoxious. Playing 4 hours of Warhammer and then like heat pedal to the metal or Monopoly, or sometimes we just play poker. Like it doesn't work in the mix. But there are some war games that are very board game-esque. And I would say Moonstone and Relic Blade are two war games that would fit really nicely into our gaming sessions. I love these two games. They're both set in a fantasy genre. Moonstone has been a very recent introduction for me. I purchased all of the fairies. And actually, when I showed these to Nick said that makes sense. And I don't know what he meant by that, but I really enjoy having the fairies because it's just something that I'm not gonna get from other types of war games. I'm not gonna get to paint a bunch of like weird moths and butterflies, but I really like the look of Moonstone. Also, Moonstone looks like it's really fun to set up a game because it's an objective-based skirmish game, and the way that you set up those objectives is you take a handful of D7s, you hold them over the board, and you drop them. And wherever they land, those are the objectives. And they're D4s, so whichever side is facing up, that's how hard that objective is to actually acquire. Seems like a really fun game. If I can get a bunch of factions built for this game, and I also would love to make this into a board game. I want to build a board and build a box for it all to live in, because that's another important feature of board games. One of the worst things about Warhammer 40,000 is when we actually sit down to play a game, we have to go to every single corner of this house and find all of the necessary paperwork and books and dice and tape measures and miniatures and proxy miniatures, because we're always trying the latest and greatest things. It takes like an hour to get a game of 40k ready, where a board game, you crack that top open, you're already playing. So I want to build actual boxes to house Moonstone and Relic Blade so that they can just sit on the shelf, beautiful and pristine, and I can pull them off, crack open the seal, and we can get to gaming. Moonstone is a little trickier than Relic Blade. Relic Blade, you need only a small number of miniatures, and it comes with cards. You do need terrain for both these games, but I think I can build one board that'll actually work well for both of these games. I actually have a bunch of MDF terrain that I want to see if I can make this stuff look really good and be magnet ready. I'm gonna get some sheet steel and carve it and hide it in such a way that all of these miniatures can actually kind of magnet stick onto the terrain, and so that all the little terrain elements like incidental stuff, barrels, I actually have, I hope they're in this box. I have pigs. Pigs are gonna be an important terrain element for my Relic Blade board, and I'm really excited to get to work on this. I love board games, but I feel like my favorite board games always get shot down, so it'll be really fun to be able to introduce some new games into our repertoire, and hopefully they'll be really popular and we'll play them all the time. And if not, I'll just read the rule books by myself and have a good time. And speaking of having a good time, this game is all for me. I love Malao. Malao is a super interesting skirmish game. I love the art style. It's very macabre and very kind of nasty, but in a really beautiful way. And I have an entire faction sitting here, new in box, ready to go. I have Riva. Riva is a resurrectionist, a grave robber that makes zombies, ghouls, spirits, and all sorts of nasty monstrosities. I love Halloween so much. I didn't really get to celebrate Halloween this year, just way too busy, but next year, or this year, 2024, I am going to make sure, I don't know if I'm gonna take time off or if I'm just gonna move heaven and earth to make sure that I get to put together this crew of creepy, disgusting, spooky, scary skeletons. I'm gonna watch Nightmare Before Christmas, Hellraiser, Trick or Treat, all of the absolute classics, and I'm gonna paint up and put together this faction. I am planning this so many months ahead of time to try to make it actually happen. Malifaux is such a cool, interesting game. This game is actually played using a deck of playing cards instead of dice. So every time you want to do something, you actually have to pull a card, and then whatever you pull, that's how strong your effect is. And you have to try to beat your opponent, who's also gonna draw a card. And then you also have a hand of cards that you can use to cheat in and out, to try to create fate, or how to change fate and make things work for you. And you're always kind of trying to play with your opponent a little bit, because you don't know what cards they have in their hand. It's random, but you don't know, like, if they swap in a 12, or if they swap in a king, are they playing their trump card? Are they playing a card to automatically win? Or do they have a really stacked hand and it's gonna be really hard to get anything off this turn? It's a really, really interesting game. I have 3 crews already, and so this will be my 4th crew, and I am super excited for it. I feel like out of all of my different armies, my different warbands, my Malifaux crews are ones that I'm really, really proud of, because I have an easier time of building something really nice and wrapping it in a nice little bow and calling it done. Where my 40k armies, every other day, Games Workshop is coming out with new miniatures and new things to add to the collection, new ways to play. Games Workshop is so open-ended that I feel like my 40k armies are never ending. Where my Malifaux teams actually do end. They have a period at the end of my warbands. I can paint them all up, I can base them all up, and they look really, really nice on the shelf. But after crapping on 40k like that, let me talk a little bit more about 40k. Inside of these 2 Sterilite boxes is something that I've been working on for about 3 years now. I am an eBay fiend. I love looking for deals, and like 3 or 4 times a year, I'll actually win an auction. I bid all the time, but I never ever win because I always just put in the lowest possible amount. Like, ooh, that thing is really cool, $7. But every now and then I win auctions like that. And so I have accumulated about 3,000 points of 2nd edition Blood Angel Space Marines. This is a massive, massive retro army, and I am really excited to see it just exist. Some of it is brand spanking new in box. A lot of it needs to be stripped and cleaned and fixed. I need to find period accurate shoulder pads and guns. There is so much TLC that this army needs, but I am really, there's like goo. There's like goo in this bag. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm really, really excited about this army. I don't even know how to make it happen. I don't have a 2nd edition Warhammer 40,000 rulebook. I could also play with Rogue Trader rules, because a lot of these models did exist before 2nd edition. But the reason it's Blood Angels is just because every single time I would buy a lot of old metal Space Marines, there would be a bunch of Death Company models in there. And so eventually I just kept pulling out the Death Company and putting them in separate bags. And eventually I thought, well, why not just use them and paint them all as Blood Angels? And that is exactly what I'm going to do. This box weighs about 10 pounds. It's so much metal, but I'm really excited to see and just to have a retro Warhammer army. I'm gonna need to get a few bottles of Scorpion Green or Goblin Green, the classic Games Workshop color. It is going to be absolute madness. I have OG rhinos, like the old, ugly, beige plastic rhinos. I am really, really excited to see what happens with this army, and I want to kind of cheat it a little bit. I want it to have that retro look, but I don't necessarily want to stick to retro painting. I want to see how good these miniatures can look. It is going to be a 2024 paint job. Oil paints, airbrush, contrast paint. I want this army to absolutely sing. I want these models to look like they've never looked before. These models, some of them, they're not older than me, but they're old. They're really, really old miniatures. and I want them to look their absolute best. The big one. This is the biggest pile of shame in my collection, and oh, you guys don't even know what's in store for this project. But first, did you know we have a Patreon? Over there, we have a new terrain set every single month, and this month we have the Crashed Spaceship. A grim, gothic, crashed vessel, the bones strewn across a battlefield, ready to give your games a lovely narrative element. And if you always want to stay up to date on the goings-on here at Eons of Battle and be entered into our monthly giveaways, this month we're picking 3 followers to receive our new terrain set. You can follow the link in the description below to sign up to our newsletter. This here is a Dark Eldar army, and I have a spreadsheet going of all of my different Warhammer 40k armies, and this is the 3rd biggest, and it's really, really big. And there's more boxes. I have about right around 5,000 points of Dark Eldar. I really like the Dark Eldar, and I've never really pulled the trigger on starting this army. I've just accumulated this army, and it's time. It is time to make this happen. I actually have a plan to work with a buddy to get a lot of this stuff painted up, and it is going to be glorious. I painted up 5 Hellions, and the color I'm going with for my dark, evil, monstrous, murderous Eldar is pink. Pink is the color that I'm going with, and it's gonna look so good. One of my all-time favorite miniatures in life is the Tantalus. The Forge Roll Tantalus is so awesome. It's like an old-time clipper ship, but that wants to stab you. It's beautiful, it's incredible, and I kind of want to put this army together just to have an excuse to have the Tantalus in front of me in all of its glory. It's like this big. I saw one at Adepticon last year. They're incredible, they're beautiful, and not only am I gonna have a Tantalus, but most of this army is mounted. I have so many Venoms, and so many jet bikes, Hellions, anything that floats, raiders. It's going to be a boat army, an absolute Eldar boat army. It is going to be incredible. My goal, at least I want to say that I'm going to get to 2,000 points because I want to play with this army. Games Workshop hasn't teased when the Dark Eldar Codex is coming out this year, but it probably, I would think it's gonna come out this year. I really hope the Eldar Codex comes out this year because Eldar are still probably way too strong. And they can't come out with the Eldar Codex without coming out with the Dark Eldar Codex because a lot of their units actually can be taken within each other's army. So I'm really, really hoping for Dark Eldar Codex this year. And if that happens, I will have an army ready to rock and roll. At least the Combat Patrol. The Combat Patrol is probably gonna be where I start because Combat Patrol is a really, really fun game mode. But man, oh man, do I have a lot of Dark Eldar. Honestly, now that I got everything out, because everything was nice and packed and put away, and now that I've got it all out, it does feel like a lot. It does feel like a heck of a lot to get done in 12 months, in a 12-month period of time. But you know what? I bet I can do it. I got a ton of miniatures done last year, so I'm really looking forward to this year. I think it's gonna be the year of the war game. I guess that's every year for me, but it's gonna be the mega year of the war game. Let me know in the comments below which project you are most excited for, and give me some painting and modeling suggestions of what I should do with some of these armies. I'm really looking forward to this year. Thanks for watching.